Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. On this episode of the New Warehouse Live, we are avoiding shiny objects just in time for MODEX. I'm joined by Ryan Chesterfield of WHSE and Parth Pethani of WHSE Robotics to discuss the current warehouse robotics landscape, how to navigate it, and what to look out for when heading to MODEX or starting your robotics journey. And we even give our thoughts on humanoid robots. So if you're heading to MODEX thinking it's time for robots in your warehouse, this is the episode for you. And if you think warehouses are sexy, be sure to come by the New Warehouse booth A10136.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
And welcome to this live episode of the New Warehouse here on LinkedIn. And today I'm going to be joined by Ryan Chesterfield of WHSE and Parth Pethani of WHSE Robotics, all very heavily involved in the robotics industry. And we're going to talk about the warehouse robotics landscape as it stands today. We're going to dive into some MODEX things as well and kind of what's happening overall and how to navigate the warehouse robotics landscape too. But first, why don't we get some background from our guests here, Ryan and Parth. So Ryan, why don't you kick it off for us and tell us kind of where you got started and what you're up to now?
I've spent my whole career in automated material handling. I started in college, crawling around the ground, working on conveyor systems. This is where I kind of came to understand the warehouse environment and made my way through a number of different companies in the industry, all on the business end. So I was selling these, automated systems, and these ranged from small, $10,000 systems all the way north of $100 million, integrated systems. So through this experience, I got to touch and feel the full breadth of automated technology. I feel very fortunate for that, and went on to work for a couple other startup automation companies. And through this experience in selling, when you're quote unquote selling, I almost kind of hate that term when it comes to this type of sale, but you're really managing all the engineering disciplines required to produce a solution that the customer needs, or, like in this case, like the customer will buy. And there's cases where, the customer will tell you they need the Ferrari and really they need the Honda, or you've got the engineers that want to build you the Ferrari and they need to build the Honda because that's what the customer can afford. But through all this experience, it occurred to me that, if I could just work for the customer, I felt like I could save them so much time and money. These resources are spending their time managing a warehouse. They're operations people. This isn't their niche. They don't necessarily understand the implications this technology is going to have when it changes their business. So I started WHSE to hope to bring this knowledge to the customer side and really improve communication between the users of this automation and the vendors, utilizing my experience. Because if you go to we're going to talk about MODEX, but 5 years ago the show was steel companies, forklift companies, and conveyor companies, and now it's software and robot companies. And so I know there's just going to be more robots out there. And so I'm out here helping to increase or improve the utilization of automation in the marketplace.
Awesome. Great. And I love that you started adding those nuts and bolts and screws to conveyors, and you've made it all the way here. And I think that's great to be able to see from all those different angles the solutions. And as you said, I think robots are going to continue to come in, and we'll dive in a little bit into that later today too, around the conversation of where to start and how the customer can navigate whether they need that Ferrari or they need that Honda. But before we kind of dive in a little deeper, let's get some background from Parth as well. So Parth, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, would love to. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Parth Pethani. I am a warehouse robotics enthusiast, and I am currently with WHSE Robotics.com. I'm founder of Robot Forward Warehousing podcast. My North Star has been always to enable robots in the warehouse. And to do that, I have been on both the sides of the aisles, if you will. That's like politician is to call. I've been a seller, I've been an end user, so I understand what customers want. At the same time, I understand what are the capability of different robotic solutions out there, and I've been trying to educate the industry through my website, through my blogs, through my podcast, and also helping industries, sellers, and end users alike through different service opportunities, service offerings as well. So MODEX is in my hometown, so I enjoy this place. When Kevin asked me to join this, I was like, yeah, I would love to. So looking forward to chat, contribute anywhere I can.
Definitely. And I'll say congratulations to Parth as well. He just released the first podcast episode last week. I've been waiting a long time for you to do that, sir. So appreciate it. And if people get a chance, definitely check out that episode for sure. And so why don't we kind of dive into, I think a good starting point is, there's so much going on with robotics and we see so much around. And obviously we mentioned MODEX there a couple of times. We're going to see so many things, new solutions, robots all around the place in Atlanta next week. But why don't we kind of get an initial definition of kind of where do you think the robotics warehouse landscape stands today? So Ryan, why don't you kind of kick us off there and give us an idea what you think is going on in the market right now?
Yeah. Well, this is how do I to pick a direction here? Well, you see, it makes sense to me why this is, but people going to MODEX are looking to solve a problem. And so, you're probably going to go to your facility and maybe look at where do you have most of your people. Maybe that kind of like makes you feel like your problem is in that direction, and it very well may be. But you see a lot of fulfillment solutions at MODEX. And this is where, the majority of labor in the warehouse is in fulfillment and picking, so to speak. So you see more and more of these, right? You see, and there's a number of different flavors. So you've got, goods to person, which are using AMRs. And then you've got, AMRs like the Locusts and the Fetches and stuff, which is more like, the AMRs are coming to the person. So they're both a fulfillment solution. They both have AMRs, but they both work, very differently. One, has these bots, caged off. One, they run around an existing facility. So just from that landscape, just from that perspective, I should say, it's easy to see a lot of these different solutions, and it takes a little bit of peeling back the onion to understand, how they might apply to you. And so I think, for the majority, you see a lot of autonomous mobile robot companies. As far as the companies that are new, you see, these are numerous. A lot of companies overseas are coming into the U.S. game. A lot of companies from China and India are coming over here. A lot of these have, prolific success overseas, and they're coming over here to attack the U.S. market. So I think that's sort of my world. So maybe I'm sort of biased towards that, but that's a lot of the new and exciting technology out there is AMR technology, and they're being used for fulfillment, for sorting, and for consolidation. Like, we're finding many different ways to strap wheels on something and have it provide benefit.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of pause there.
Yeah, we definitely strap the wheels on it, right, and make it automated, right? But yeah, I think it's very interesting, and especially there's a lot of concentration on that picking side, as you mentioned, because it is such a labor burden, I guess you could say, in a sense, and labor sucks. So I'm curious, Parth, where does the warehouse robotics market kind of stand right now today? What do you think from your perspective?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the important, not a milestone, but important thing that happened last year was the Ocado Auto Store verdict. And at least in my LinkedIn feed and my newsletters, what I've seen is that after that judgment came out, there was a sudden spike in Cube ASRS kind of solutions. If you think about it, I think at least 3 or 4 companies came out with solutions which uses, of course, an AMR kind of, like a mobile bot, which uses the cube of the vertical space within the warehouse. So I felt like that was an interesting development, and I was not expecting that after that verdict. So it feels like this year we will see some of those, not to the level where we saw the AMR vendors at MODEX, but we will see a decent number of vendors at MODEX who will have some sort of Cube ASRS solutions trying to use the vertical space. And from an AMR perspective, I think Ryan touched on a good point that person to goods, goods to person solutions are pretty much at the end have the same kind of transportation tool, which is an AMR, just solving in a different ways. The benefit of person to goods, as everyone knows, is quicker to implement. And for a goods to person solution, there is some exercise to be done before a goods to person solution can be installed.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think I've seen a lot of focus on and a lot of talk about the ASRS systems too, as well, and kind of the expansion of that. But I'm curious, Ryan, you mentioned there, seeing some overseas players that have had success internationally now coming into the U.S. market. I mean, if you guys look at kind of the international market as a whole, I mean, where do you think kind of in the world is really leading from a warehouse robotics standpoint? I mean, is it the U.S. or is it another country? I mean, where is really kind of excelling and really adding at a much faster rate?
Yeah, Europe has always been ahead of us. I mean, when I worked for a large integrator, Europe was always buying the Ferraris. There was no Hondas. Their space is more constricted. Their labor and safety laws are more constricted. So the ROI for the technology is higher there. So they've kind of always been ahead of us. But you've seen a lot of activity in China, especially with growing players like Alibaba, and there's, I'm sure, a handful of others that are doing e-com fulfillment over there, especially just to serve the population in the urban environments. I think they found benefits to that. I think the challenge, these players are going to have is the same challenge any international player coming into the U.S. just getting started. This stuff, it breaks sometimes. So the ability to support it is going to be second to none. And, I guess I kind of already said this, but this is consistent with the conditions today. These companies will have to figure out how they're going to be able to support this. And this is new for customers, right? They're going from playing baseball to basketball. They're playing a different sport when before they have to fix it, they got to scratch something out on a clipboard and radio to somebody. Now they have to change something in a software. And so I think that's kind of important to think about when you're going to look at MODEX, like what is your team actually going to be ready for? What sort of change management are you willing to accept? And Parth kind of touched on this, with the sort of easier to implement the person to goods versus the goods to person. You're going to be clearing out a portion of your warehouse and totally changing the furniture around, and that's going to totally change how you interact with it. So important consideration.
And many times, to that point, Ryan, many times folks also needs to, from a picking side, there are facility uphill battles that folks have to do, but they also have software changes. So for example, if you have a labor management system, it completely changes if you put in a new kind of solution like goods to person solution to solve for your site. So that is also something that folks need to understand when they go on this exercise of finding the right robot solution for their warehouses.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's a kind of a great segue there into kind of our next question. I mean, when we look at, and we're talking about, these AMRs and goods to person to good, ASRS type of solutions, but I think we're at a point where we're seeing a lot of people are kind of taking those first steps maybe into robotics. And if someone is looking to take their first step, I mean, how should they really approach that? What should they be doing to prepare for that? How should they plan for that? And what's really the right way to go about that?
We'll be back after a quick break. You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, well, one thing I'll start with bringing IT in early. I can't tell you how many projects, certainly the majority, would get months down the road and IT wasn't brought in soon enough, or we can't send data to the cloud. Like, there would be some rules that had been broken that the operations team wasn't aware of that can be showstoppers. So I think it kind of comes down to a data conversation, and certainly important to go into this show understanding what data systems you have available, and even what resources you have internally to manipulate these data systems. Parth kind of touched on this, but depending on the solution that you go with, some are going to require more, call it work or effort or coordination on your end to bundle that data, like the system needs to consume it. So having an understanding of what your systems are capable of today, and really like what the rules are from your IT team. I kind of gave this example earlier, but if your IT team has security rules that say no data can leave the building, well then, anyone that has a cloud-based compute solution is not going to fly. Or you're going to have to educate that resource on why this cloud-based system is secure. That'll be an exercise. So I think certainly understanding where this data is going to come from is really important, because I saw a lot of companies implement systems without necessarily integrating it. You can do automation without necessarily connecting it with your system. In this case, then a human is kind of making the input to the automation. And when you do that, you're taking away from your ROI. I don't want to say that you're never going to find ROI, but integrating your systems is how you're really going to get the synergy of this flowing. And when you have people in the middle, it's different people behave different ways. It creates variables, basically. So the data is really important. Yeah. I'll start there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think having IT buy-in from the beginning, preparing them that, hey, a change is coming, it's going to be a game changer overall for the whole project success. I think what I also recommend for folks that are visiting from an end user perspective when they're going into MODEX is like understanding what are the pain points. Is their pain point really a capacity pain point or just a throughput point, right? For example, when you have a capacity issue, you need to figure out, are you using your vertical space better? Are you looking for robots that can help you with better capacity within the same footprint? Or you are just looking for a better kind of robotic solution that is helping you push out more volume out of your shift. So it can be robots, it can be conveyor, it can be any sort of changes that can help you do that to push out more volume. But just understanding from an operations perspective, what am I really chasing for? Is it better productivity or better capacity within the same footprint? Can really help you look at the solution and like, okay, no, this is something I can completely check it off of my list because it's not going to help with my current problem. Or no, this is something I can think about because it's giving me the vertical space that I don't have.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's great points there, especially around the understanding of what is the challenge you're facing right now, and the point from Ryan about the data and understanding, where is that data at and how is that you're going to interact with that data for that full integration to be able to make that happen and take that human element out of it, right? Because we're bringing robotics to reduce the amount of human element we need. And as you said, Ryan, I mean, if you can bring in robotics and have some human inputs, but that's kind of not getting the full benefit of what you're potentially looking for. So I'm curious from both of your perspectives. I mean, you said involve IT early in the process, get them understanding that. But I mean, what if your company doesn't have like some internal knowledge around robotics, I mean, at what point do you think it makes sense to engage like a consultant or engage an integrator to be able to help you kind of navigate and understand like in which direction you should go? Parth, you want to start?
Yeah, I think at what point is when the first thought comes in is when I'm not trying to sell my services, but I'm just saying it's just because I think let's be honest, right? And I've been vocal for this. Operators don't get paid to learn new technologies; they get paid to ship orders, right? So as an operator, when you're trying to look for new technologies, you are already drinking from a fire hose, because while you're balancing your day-to-day job, you definitely have like more than 100 different vendors to understand what are the benefits, what are the shortcomings, anything around that space. And I think what happens in that filter of knowledge, that you lose the motivation of just chasing anything and you just go back to your day-to-day job. So I think and that's why I like whenever you think about any kind of operational issue where you think is it a time to put robots in it, I think that's the time to involve, because many consultants out there, many services out there pretty much don't just give you a robotic solution right from the get-go. They will come in, they will identify the opportunities, they will do your basic, and this is what I'm a advocate of, is like for any warehouse there is a maturity curve. You start with your basic industrial engineering fundamentals, right pick path, right replenishments, right slotting, then go on to your second phase, which is your WMS optimization. Anything, use your WMS capability to the level that you can understand. So work with your WMS vendor, try to exploit all the functionalities that are available to your best use. And then that's after you have your step 1 and step 2 stabilize. It's that the time that you start thinking about, okay, is now I have 1 and 2 done, let's talk about robots. So for me, when you are at that step 3, it's when you really started thinking about robots. Don't look at robots as a magic pill that will come and solve everything.
Interesting. And Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, Parth, I like your statement about the maturity curve, and certainly is the case. There's a wide range of capabilities and personalities of customers, businesses, and operations. And like anything else, if you have somebody or more than one person on your team that has experience implementing these systems, great. You've got one box checked. The other box that's going to be difficult to check, that Parth talked about, is a bandwidth issue. These people have a job to do on a daily basis, and a project like this is a major undertaking. So certainly a consultant that has experience is going to be able to add a lot of value. In this technology is I'm going to say it's on the other side of the fence, maybe a couple fences away from what these people do on a daily basis, and just the knowledge of how that's going to affect your business is just going to be able to set expectations much better of what you're going to experience. So I think it depends on the experience that you have, but also the technology out there is kind of growing at a rate that's difficult to catch up with. I mean, this is even sort of a reason that I decided to start the business, was I just saw opportunity to help folks out there, because I've also come to the understanding that there's sort of a niche understanding of these systems, and having awareness of the software, the hardware, and the operational aspects will help somebody understand your operation as a personality, because not one solution is going to make sense for everybody. Like, everyone needs a custom brownie recipe. Someone may like pecans on there, somebody maybe likes it a little more sweet, but there's an order of operations to be able to support the technology and a custom recipe. The expertise in the domain is going to be able to point you in that direction so much faster with so much less risk if they've done it before.
Yeah, and I think that makes so much sense, because I mean, I think part of what you said about your warehouse manager, your operator, you're paying them to ship orders, right? And I think that kind of goes to a little post I had there on LinkedIn the other day about, where are the warehouse managers that like tech? But I mean, at the same time, it's hard for someone who is an operator to get that vast amount of knowledge and be exposed to all of those different solutions. So I mean, I think it makes sense to bring somebody in to start that process and really help them navigate and understand not only kind of what's out there, but what's out there that makes sense for them in the current moment, right? And then what's more of like, 2, 3, 4-year kind of future for them in the long term as they kind of get that foundational robotic solution in place and really be able to navigate that. So I think that makes a lot of sense for sure. And I'm curious in that regard. I mean, obviously you guys have both engaged in robotics projects before and, have experienced the ups and downs, I'm sure. And so what are some of the kind of common mistakes maybe that you see out there when people are first starting to consider robots, starting to get into robotics and maybe making the wrong decisions or not necessarily knowing how to navigate it properly?
I'll take what Ryan said. In IT, involvement of IT is very important. I think I've seen projects, as Ryan also seen it, like if you don't involve them, what will happen is, let's say an engineering team, not the software engineering team or typical industry engineering team goes out, finds the right robot solution fit for their warehouses or their opportunity. And if they don't have IT buy-in, what will happen is that every exercise will not be done because there is no one from the IT to integrate it. So because they already have a pipeline of other 10 projects that need to be done, so that get projects pushed back. So just echoing and validating what Ryan said, I think involving IT is very important. Another thing that I felt a lot of times for the project success, not as a lessons learned, but for a project success, overall operations and maintenance teams involvement is also important because at least in my language, in my definition, project go live is not a success point, but the project continuation or the project sustenance is actually a good project that went well. Go live is important milestone, but not the end of the project. So from a maintenance side, if you have a stronger maintenance team, hire the right maintenance managers, maintenance tech that's needed to keep the operations running is very important as well. So having that, of course, you don't need maintenance, probably don't need a person, depending on the project. Let me rephrase that. Depending on the project, you will need maintenance involvement from the get-go, or maybe somewhere halfway down or 3/4 way or journey, but you need to think about that as well.
Interesting. And what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, great place to start, of course. And I'll piggyback on building implications. Do you lease your building or do you buy? Is your building lease coming up in a year? And then, the business is not sure about what's going to happen. So what I guess I'm saying is kind of in the same chord of being aligned with IT, being aligned with the decision makers of what the goal really is. And Parth, you kind of said this in a fashion earlier, but if we're going to get a new building, maybe a goods to person solution that's going to, take up 20% of the warehouse or whatever it is, makes more sense than something that can be implemented quicker, right? If we're not sure what's going to happen after a year, maybe we're going to acquire a company, or maybe we're making a big marketing push and we're a 3PL trying to bring in new clients. So having awareness of what the goal line is, 5 years down the road, certainly a handy place to start. That's going to point you in directions of what's possible for you. And so I think also, I'll say in that same vein, having a champion on the user side, somebody on the user side is going to have to champion this project through. And so do you have, if you're a business leader, if you're the CEO and you've tasked your team to go out there and, help us with this labor problem, we gotta improve the bottom line. Make sure you've got somebody that is going to be able to push this through. Think about, who's going to be the actual resource, and you're going to need a team to do this, and IT will need to be part of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it's such a great point to get that IT buy-in, because I think it is, at the end of the day, like you can take it so far from an operations perspective, but like if IT, I forget what it was, Ryan or Parth that said it, but if IT has like 10 projects going on right now. Like, are they really gonna like be on board with you and like, get this to where you wanted to get it to? And so I think it's so important to have that relationship and make sure that happens and being able to do that. And I'm curious, Ryan, to you mentioned there, if you're a 3PL and you're going to make like a marketing push to bring in new clients and, considering that, I mean, how do you, especially from like a 3PL perspective, you may have, different types of clients in there, which have different types of products that have different types of requirements. I mean, how do you think about that and making sure that, I guess, the robot solution is flexible enough to be able to handle different types of product profiles and things of that nature?
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough putt, but it comes down to, maybe, and not every 3PL could do this, but the actual products that will be fulfilled. So let's say you're a cosmetics company and you're going to make a push, or cosmetics 3PL is sort of what you specialize in. It's maybe small stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making a push for more small stuff. And this targets, their products are about the same size. That's going to like give you kind of a starting indicator is like, will this technology work for you? Kind of starts with this, with tote fill and whatnot. And, I think you want to build your business to be flexible. So there's certainly a bit of a guessing game. We try to remove that guessing game by looking at the data. Now, if you don't have these clients yet, of course, there's not necessarily data there, but you would plan for extra capacity and all the different, I'll say carton sizes that you're going after. You kind of start there. I mean, if you're doing garden hoses and toothbrushes, you're going to have to build in a lot of flexibility. It's going to be tougher to do that. You look at where, you have repetition. But if you're cosmetics, or you work with cosmetics and chapsticks and other small, e-cigarette, whatever else is small, that's a horse of a different color.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, Parth, your thoughts, because you spent some time on the 3PL side recently too, right?
Yeah.
So tell us, how did you kind of navigate that?
It's a question that every executive leadership thinks about. I think from a 3PL perspective, it might be a long-winded answer, but let me take a try. So from a 3PL perspective, there are only 3 or 4 opportunities for any kind of robotics play to be done. So either it's during new sales, single site, brand new client, like what we saw recently with GXO and Eddie Bauer in Ohio. It was a brand new building, brand new implementation. They were using gray orange for that site. It was because GXO could spend that much money and it was already logged in with that client for the life of that building. They realized that it's worth investing into an automation that can help that. So that was one play that a 3PL did, where they had a buy-in from the customer and it was a brand new site. But when you have an existing site and you do not have a client buy-in and trying to find a solution for yourself, it's going to be a little tricky, right? And if we talk about that one, because if you are, and this I think we all preach this in 3PL world, that go for your niche, right? What's your niche? If your niche is gonna be dog food, right, then your solution has to something around dog food or some big bulky items. But if your niche is gonna be around apparels, try to find solutions which are according to the apparels. But the tricky part for any 3PL, and there is no sugarcoating it here, is that it's gonna be hard if you're doing it by yourself without any client buy-in, because you are basically playing a gamble, thinking that my gamble is going to work out. And most of the time it works out because you are such a niche, but it's going to be a gamble that you'll be taking, that my next client will be the one similar to what automation can support. I think that's where we are seeing a lot of, and I think that's the hesitation which has, to my knowledge, has hindered the adoption of robots in 3PL space for an existing warehouse, because the folks don't know, right, what will be my next client. Even though they know they're super niche, they can take a bet of $5 to $10 million before just betting on themselves. So it's just a tricky play, because you lose a little bit flexibility when you go for a solution like a good super solution which has a fence and which has a shelves and stuff like that. I mean, folks can argue that as well, because I have seen arguments as well, like, hey, Amazon is the best case of 3PL. They take care, they take anything, and they have robots. But what Amazon does is they have two specific DCs, sortables and non-sortables. And sortable warehouses have specific SKU dimensions, specific weights and dimensions that they allow to go through that warehouse, and that's where they have kivas. So if a 3PL has that kind of power to define my warehouse in California will only do apparels, doesn't matter, and I have the pipeline for apparels, then yeah, of course you should go, because now you know your SKU profile. And similarly, if you have dog food going through North Carolina, that's great. Then I'll figure out a solution that can do dog food. So it's tricky 3PL, but you just have to be a little creative around that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's great to give kind of that perspective too. And I think it makes total sense. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about foundationally, like defining like what is our problem, where is our data set, and then also understanding from a 3PL perspective, like, okay, what am I going to focus on? What kind of products am I going to focus on, and make the decision around that to be able to be capable of that. So, I mean, I think it takes probably takes a little bit of discipline, I would say, but I think that's kind of the way to go. So very interesting stuff with you guys kind of here on the landscape of robotics and how to navigate it a little bit. And now we mentioned MODEX a couple times, and we're coming up on MODEX, but what kind of what companies or what robotic applications, I think I'm curious to hear, are most exciting for you right now? Like, what's really catching your attention?
Well, we kind of talked about the goods to person technologies that are, taking advantage of Cube and the transportation of goods. I'm curious to see what new solutions are out there, or maybe what new bells and whistles the existing providers have added onto there. Some of these are, they're arming the AMR bots with the ability to sort or buffer totes, and this can change the game when it comes to productivity. So it'll be interesting to see how the existing players have improved their products to deal with the range of order profiles and SKUs that they need to. As Parth said, you lose a little bit of flexibility when you go this direction. So that's kind of what everybody is chasing. And it'll be interesting to see what new players are out there, and if anyone's doing anything dramatically different. I think that's what I'm interested to see.
Okay. And those specific companies or anything you're looking out for?
I think no specific companies. I mean, I think I see new ones every year.
Yeah.
So, Adverb had a big presence last year. I'm curious to see what they're doing. ForwardX was kind of a new player that came out. They're touting some large customers and a large install base. So it'll be interesting to connect with them. They've got sort of a fleet of AMRs that do different functions. But I'm kind of interested in them all.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And Parth, what about you? What's exciting for you?
Yeah, I think same for me. I think Cube ASRS is very interesting space for me, because as I said, I feel like a lot of folks are coming in. I think the challenge would be like what I feel like Logimat and MODEX should have planned was not so close, so we could have some European presence as well, right? So I think we will lose some good European vendors coming to MODEX. So they have good solutions as well. And I think another thing that I'm interested to know or learn this year is going to be two aspects, not one, but two. One is what another thing would be end of line packaging or packaging solutions like pack size or rand pack or stuff like that. I want to see what solutions they have. And at the same time, I want to know, I think there will be more software players this time, the orchestrations, meaning that how do we orchestrate different warehouse or robots within your WMS. So I think I'm curious to learn about that as well.
Interesting. Yeah. I think even like I said, Manifest a couple weeks ago, and that was like a big focus too, was kind of the software side and the overall data, like we were talking about earlier, that's going to kind of make that orchestration come together and lay that foundational for putting the hardware in place. So I think it'd be interesting to see kind of that as well. And I think from my perspective, I'm always interested in and excited about kind of the robotics and automation around truck loading, unloading, container unloading. I think Slip Robotics is doing some really cool stuff as well. Interested to see. I think Vision Nav, I talked to them recently. They're going to have a truck loader, unloader, pallet jack on display too. I think they're going to be unveiling. So it'd be interesting to see all that kind of stuff. I'm curious though, ProMat last year, I think maybe the we could say maybe the star of the show was the Digit humanoid robot from Agility, right? So what do you guys think about humanoid robots? Yay or nay?
Man, it's a okay. I mean, it's an engineering marvel, right? It's not easy to achieve that kind of amazing robots. And I think hats off to all the PhDs, all the engineers behind that to make that happen. But my personal view right now is going to be it's an over engineering problem. It's an over engineering for a warehousing side. I think warehousing is not that complex. We can pretty much do all the things in warehouse with a smaller, or I would say a specified use case or specified robots. So I think for humanoids to exist in warehouse, it's going to be a little while. I think we haven't even captured the safety aspect of it, because I don't think so there exists any safety standards which allows or which controls or which dictates a humanoid working next to a robot. So I think that's something we still have to explore. So humanoids are great. Not sure yet if it's warehousing is the place that they will be finding their meat on the bone.
Interesting. What do you think about humanoids, Ryan?
Yeah, I think Parth hit it on the head. Electromechanically, it's very impressive what they've been able to do. And if you were ProMat last year, like you said, I mean, the Aptronics booth was just flooded with people watching it work. And so I think it's going to be a while before this technology provides, an ROI in an operation. But I don't think that's necessarily like their goal right now. I think they're trying to get this technology to move and to do some of the functions. And, they're kind of creating a jack of all trades, master of none. And Parth kind of indicated that there's existing solutions today that may be able to move a tote more efficiently or be able to move it and sort it, like a conveyor, for example. So I think it's a while before we see, these working next to people. Parth talked about the regulation. There's strict regulations that the AMRs have to adhere to now, and it constricts their capability or productivity quite a bit. I mean, you can't go faster than 3.9 meters per second or whatever it is. You have to go slow. And so eventually there will be standards that this technology, these humanoids, have to adhere to that isn't there yet. And so for now, it's kind of, I think they're working in playgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting. And we were talking before we went live here, but I think for me, it's kind of like, I'm like, why does the robot need to look like a human? Right. I think it's interesting. Like Ryan, you mentioned earlier, like you said, we're strapping wheels on stuff, and it seems like that works well. So I guess I'm curious to see why does that form factor really matter, and does it really kind of replace the human in the long run? I think it's going to be a while before we see that really be effective in that sense. I think it's interesting, certainly, definitely a marvel, but yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how that kind of continues to evolve there. So very interesting stuff. But if people are going to MODEX and they're trying to navigate, and like we said, there's just so many solutions there, so many options, what would be your best advice for how to kind of prepare to go into MODEX next week and get the most out of it?
Don't do everything in one day. That's what I'll say. Don't do everything in one day. You'll be tired at the end of the day. Break it in a couple of days. If you can do 2 days, that's great. If you can do 3, great. That's even greater, best. But don't do it in one day. You will hate yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. There's so much to see. Definitely.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah. I think if there's if there's a technology that seems really interesting, or you had a conversation and you're looking, at another conversation, make sure you ask the question, how do they fix it when it breaks? Or how do I fix it when it breaks? And you have an awareness of that capability. I would say if somebody can't be there within a day, you're putting yourself in a pretty dicey situation. And this is kind of pointing it to a lot of the players that are coming into the market. This is the hill they have to climb. It's their ability to get on site and do this. So if you feel you're getting traction, basically make sure they can support you.
All right. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I definitely echo Parth what you're saying there, that, one day is not enough. Someone said that to me the other day, like, oh, I think I'm going to come, for 1 day or something. I'm like, no, like you got to be there at least 2 days. There's just so much to see. And I think people, it's interesting because we see still a lot of people that are, I think, learning about MODEX and ProMat and all that stuff. And I don't think they realize just the kind of massive scale that the show is, like how many people are going to be there and just how many vendors and the overall size to cover all that ground. So I think it's definitely great advice to go more than 1 day and obviously, put those comfy shoes on too, right?
I'll talk about the magnitude of MODEX. I'll give you I'll give you an anecdote from here in Atlanta.
Sure.
All the hotels, all the basically good hangout places like Top Golf and a couple of other places, they have a community managers who reaches out to you like few months before MODEX that, hey, I know MODEX is happening, we can have a booth for you and stuff like that. So they have a dedicated task force to reach out to business leaders to make sure after hours activities are being booked. So that's the magnitude. That's the impact that MODEX has on the local community here.
Yeah. I think it's just, it's insane. I mean, because it's like 50,000 people, something like that, I think is the expectation. So
wow.
Definitely a huge show, and we're definitely looking forward to seeing it. And both of you guys will be there, correct? So
yes.
If people
Indeed.
are interested to maybe pick your brains a little bit, they can track you down over there. And so we appreciate you listening, and definitely appreciate Ryan and Parth joining in here. So if people are interested in getting in touch with you, Ryan, and learning more about AutoFC, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, big LinkedIn person, or auto-fc.com.
All right, great. And Parth, what about you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yep, same as Ryan. Find me on LinkedIn. The website is WHSE robotics.com.
All right, great. And definitely the three of us will be at MODEX for sure. The new warehouse will be in booth A10136 doing podcasts there. So definitely come by, check us out. We'll have some Warehouses Are Sexy swag, so don't miss out on that. But other than that, thank you, Parth and Ryan, for joining me today for this conversation and giving us all these insights about warehouse robotics. And thanks to everybody for listening as well. Hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the new warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the new warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.